From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
All right, so I've already said good morning, but I also want to welcome you to our tent pavilion, the Poetry and Prose Pavilion at the 2014 National Book Festival. On behalf of the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the sponsor for this pavilion, we're so grateful that you guys are here and have joined us this morning. My name is Eleanor Billington, and I manage the Poetry Out Loud program at the National Endowment for the Arts. So what is Poetry Out Loud? Poetry Out Loud is a program that the NEA and the Poetry Foundation, our partners in Chicago, Steve Young, my colleague from the Poetry Foundation, is here this morning. We have partnered together along with the 53 state and jurisdictional arts agencies to support the Poetry Out Loud program. And this is a program that encourages young people, 9th through 12th graders across the country, to learn about classic and contemporary poetry. And they do this through memorization and recitation. You'll see some of that this morning. So Poetry Out Loud not only helps students learn a poem, but they're also building life skills. They're learning analytical skills, they're also building self-confidence, and they're learning about their literary heritage. All very important things. They may sound a little dry to you right now, a little academic, but I promise once the kids come up here and take the stage, you'll see how alive and electric their recitations are. The Poetry Out Loud program is administered through a pyramid structure, so it starts at the classroom level. Winners in the classroom level would advance to the school-wide competition, and then to a regional or a state competition, and ultimately they come to DC to the national finals. And the finals are held here in late April, which is National Poetry Month, so it's a good fit. So if you're an interested high school student in the audience, please talk with your teacher about getting involved with Poetry Out Loud this year. And if you're a teacher, please come and talk to me. After this presentation is over, I'll be at the table in the back, and you can ask me questions. It is not too late to get involved. In fact, this is our 10th anniversary of Poetry Out Loud, so it's a very special, exciting time to join the program, to be a part of it. And again, it's not too late. We have a great website that's dedicated to Poetry Out Loud, so if you have a smartphone, a genius phone, a phone that connects to the internet, which most people do, you can actually go right now to poetryoutloud.org and look up the 800 eligible poems that are on the website, as well as examples of recitations, and also a PDF of a comprehensive teacher's guide. So it's all online. Last year, we had more than 365,000 high school students participate in Poetry Out Loud. And today, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to hear from 3 of these students who advanced to the national finals. They're actually our top 3 finalists, so first, second, and third place. Coming with places is prizes. So each year, we give more than $100,000 in awards and school stipends through the Poetry Out Loud program. And the way this breaks down is that each state winner receives $200 and an all-expenses-paid trip to come to DC and to compete for the national championship. The state winner's school then receives a $500 stipend for the purchase of poetry books, which often makes teachers and principals very happy. The first runner-up in each state receives $100, with $200 for his or her school library. And the national champion receives $20,000, second place receives $10,000, and third place receives $5,000. In addition, 6 national finalists and 3 runners-up receive $1,000. So again, great prizes at stake, a lot of fun competing for those awards, but we believe, and I think the students will agree, that the most rewarding and exciting part about Poetry Out Loud is the way that the students connect with great writing and great stories through the poems that they memorize. The brilliant and beloved Irish poet, Seamus Heaney, died a year ago today. In his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, he talked about crediting poetry, saying this: "I credit it because credit is due to it, in our time and in all time, for its truth to life, in every sense of that phrase." So by reciting for you today, these students are giving credit to poetry, to the wisdom and wonder of words, and they are sharing truth. So I invite you to listen and to listen carefully. All right, let me introduce our first student. Natasha Vargas is the 2014 Poetry Out Loud state champion from New Jersey, and she finished in 3rd place at the national finals last April. Natasha has always been interested in the arts and creative expression. She graduated from Lawrence High School this year and is attending Muhlenberg College. Natasha's poem, Chance Meeting, was selected to be published in the Retrospective Poets Invitational Commemorative Booklet. Please join me in welcoming Natasha to the stage.
Hello, everybody. Today, the first poem that I will be reciting is called A Locked House by W.D. Snodgrass. As we drove back crossing the hill, the house still hidden in the trees, I always thought, a fool's fear, that it might have caught fire. Someone could have broken in, as if things must have been too good here. Still, we always found it locked tight, safe and sound. I mentioned that once, as a joke. No doubt we spoke of the absurdity to fear some dour god's jealousy of our good fortune. From the farm next door, our neighbors saw no harm came to the things we cared for here. What did we have to fear? Maybe I should have thought. All such things rot, fall, barns, houses, furniture. We two are stronger than we were apart. We've grown together. Everything we own can burn. We know what counts. Some such idea. We said as much. We had watched friends driven to betray, felt that love drained away some self they need. We had said love, like a growth, can feed on hate we turn in and disguise. We warned ourselves that you might despise me, hate all we both loved best. None of us ever guessed. The house still stands, locked, as it stood untouched a good 2 years after you went. Some things passed in the settlement, some things slipped away. Enough's left that I come back sometimes. The theft and vandalism were our own. Maybe we should have known. Thank you. The second poem that I will be reciting is called Ecology by Jack Collum. Surrounded by bone, surrounded by cells, by rings of hell, by hair. Surrounded by air is a thing, surrounded by silhouette, by honey-wet bees, yet by skeletons of trees. Surrounded by actual, yes, for practical purposes, people. Surrounded by surreal popcorn, surrounded by the reborn. Surrender in the center to surroundings. Oh, surrender forever, never end her. Let her blend around. Surrender to the surroundings that surround the tender endo. Surrender that tumble through the tumbling to, that blue that curls around the crumbling to, that the blue that rumbles under the sun bounding the pearl that we walk on, talk on. We can chalk that up to experience. Sensing the brown here that's blue now, a drop of water surrounding a cow that's black and white, the warbling Blackburnian twitter that's machining midnight, orange in the light, that's glittering in the light green visible wind. That's the ticket to the tunnel through the thicket. That's a cricket's funnel of music to correct and pick it out from under. The wing that whirls up, over, and out. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. That was excellent. All right, next, I'm really happy to welcome the 2014 Poetry Out Loud Ohio State champion, Lake Wilburn. Lake was our first runner-up at Nationals, meaning that he took second place overall. He's a senior at Centennial High School in Columbus, Ohio. He enjoys soccer, tennis, literature, theater, and the company of his friends and family. He started acting at age 9, and he spent half of his summer at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. Welcome, Lake.
Hello, all. I want to thank you all for coming out. This is quite an event. This first poem that I will be reciting is entitled Double Dutch by Gregory Pardlo. The girls turning double Dutch, bob and weave like boxers pulling punches, shadowing each other, sparring across the slack cord, casting parabolas in the air. They whip quick as an infant's pulse, and the jumper, before she enters the winking, nods in time, as if she has a notion to share, waiting her chance to speak. But she's anticipating the upbeat, like a band leader counting off the tune they are about to swing into. The jumper stair-steps into mid-air as if she's jumping rope in low gravity, training for a lunar mission. Airborne a moment long enough to fit a second thought in, she looks caught in the mouth bones of a fish as she floats into motion like a figure in a stack of time-lapse photos, thumbed alive. Once inside, the bells tied to her shoestrings rouse the gods who've lain in the dust since the Dutch acquired Manhattan. How she dances patterns like a dust-heavy bee, retracing its travels in scale before the hive. How the whole stunning contraption of girl and rope slaps and scoops like a paddle boat. Her misted skin arranges the light with each adjustment and flex. Now heather-hued, now sheen, light listing on the fulcrum of a wrist and the bare jutted joints of elbow and knee, and the faceted surfaces of muscle, surfaces fracturing and reforming like a sun-tickled sleeve of running water. She makes jewelry of herself and garlands the ground with shadows. Thank you. This next poem is entitled They Feed They Lion by Philip Levine. Out of burlap sacks, out of bearing butter, out of black bean and wet slate bread, out of the acids of rage, the candor of tar, out of creosote, gasoline, drive shafts, wooden dollies, they lion grow. Out of the gray hills of industrial barns, out of rain, out of bus ride, West Virginia to kiss my ass, out of buried aunties, mothers hardening like pounded stumps, out of the bones need to sharpen and the muscles to stretch. They lion grow. Earth is eating trees, fence posts, gutted cars. Earth is calling in her little ones. Come home from pig balls. From the ferocity of pig driven to holiness, from the furred ear and the full jowl come the repose of the hung belly. From the purpose they lion grow. From the sweet glues of the trotters come the sweet kinks of the fist. From the full flower of the hams, the thorax of caves. From bow down, come rise up. Come they lion from the reeds of shovels. The grained arm that pulls the hands, they lion grow. From my 5 arms and all my hands, from all my white sins forgiven, they feed. From my car passing under the stars, they lion. From my children inherit. From the oak turned to a wall, they lion. From they sack and they belly opened, and all that was hidden burning on the oil-stained earth, they feed, they lion. And he comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lake. Finally, we welcome the 2014 Tennessee State Champion, who is also our Poetry Out Loud National Champion for this year, Anita Norman. Anita is a senior at Arlington High School just outside of Memphis, Tennessee. Her favorite author is James Baldwin, and she enjoys reading, singing, and spending time with her family. This year, Anita won the Greater Memphis Poetry Slam and was invited to be a special guest at the Poets House annual Bridge Walk in New York City. In October, she will also be a guest speaker at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Please welcome Anita Norman.
Hello, everyone. The first poem I'll be reciting is The Layers by Stanley Kunitz. I have walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I am compelled to look, before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet, I turn exulting somewhat, with my will intact to go wherever I need to go. and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me. Live in the layers, not on the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes. The next poem I'll be reciting is entitled Morning Poem for the Queen of Sunday by Robert Hayden. Lords lost him, his mockingbird, his fancy warbler. Satan sweet-talked her. 4 bullets hushed her. Who would have thought she'd end that way? 4 bullets hushed her and the world a-clang with evil. Who's going to make old hardened sinner men tremble now and the righteous rock? Oh, who and oh, who will sing Jesus down to help with struggling and doing without and being colored all through Blue Monday till way next Sunday? All those angels in their creton clouds and finery, the true believer saw when she reared back her head and sang. All those angels are surely weeping. Who would have thought she'd end that way? 4 holes in her heart, the gold works wrecked, but she looks so natural in her big bronze coffin among the broken hearts and gates ajar. It's as if any moment she'd lift her head from its pillow of chill gardenias and turn this quiet into shouting Sunday and make folks forget what she did on Monday. Oh, Satan sweet-talked her, and 4 bullets hushed her. Lords lost him his diva, his fancy warblers gone. Who would have thought? Who would have thought she'd end that way?
Thank you so much, Anita. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left in our session, so I'm going to invite all 3 of our students back up onto the stage to take a couple of questions, either from the audience or to answer some questions I have for them. So let's give them another round of applause and get them back up here. All right. right, so if you guys are just joining us, this is the NEA's Poetry and Prose Pavilion. I keep saying tent. We're inside this year, the pavilion. And this is the Poetry Out Loud portion of our programming. So these students are Poetry Out Loud champions. They're actually first, second, and third place winners from our 2014 national competition. So if you as an audience have any questions for them, please feel free to come up to the mic. And if you don't, there are a couple things that I'd like to ask them actually, and I want you guys to hear from them. They're the best spokespeople for this program. So I guess, Natasha, we'll start with you, if you don't mind. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your experience with poetry before the program and how you got involved with Poetry Out Loud? Have you always loved poetry or not so much? How did you get involved?
Before Poetry Out Loud, I wasn't that involved with poetry. I had learned it through classes, like English class, and I had read it, like some children's poetry by Shel Silverstein and things like that, but I hadn't really been big on reciting it. I actually got involved in Poetry Out Loud my freshman year of high school because it was a requirement. It was for a grade, yeah. So if you're a teacher, please make it a requirement. So I ended up reciting In the Basement of the Goodwill Store by Ted Kooser, and I still, to this day, really love that poem. And when I recited it to my class, I used to be very shy, so I don't think anyone in my class had ever actually heard me speak before. And my teacher had another teacher come in as a guest judge. And when I recited my poem, the guest judge started crying, and she was just so moved by it. And the fact that I could touch someone to that extent with my words, or with the words of Ted Kooser, it meant a lot to me. And I competed every year from that point on, freshman, sophomore, junior year, and I always placed first runner-up in my high school competition. And then senior year rolled around, and I finally made it through, and here I am today. And it's been great every single time I've gotten to perform.
I'm glad you made it through. All right, Lake, we have a question from the audience. I'm sorry, thank you. Please go ahead. Do you mind just introducing yourself quickly?
Sure,
Thank you.
my name is Lauren Klingen, and I'm an English teacher. I do require my students every marking period to recite a poem. I run our school's Poetry Out Loud competition, and my question for all of you is, what was your process for picking the poems that you chose? I know that there's a requirement of a pre-20th century poem and 25 lines or fewer. What was going into your thoughts in choosing your poems?
Lake, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah,
Start out?
sure. I'll do
The microphone.
Personally, picking the poems was kind of a family affair. My parents are both English majors, and we always had poetry in the house when we were growing up, my brother and I. And so picking these poems was kind of like, well, first you had to like the poem, you know, and that kind of meant you had to understand the poem, which is easier said than done. So my family and I, mainly my father and I, we would go through the anthology online, and we would look through all the poems, and we'd pick out ones that we thought were interesting at first, either because of rhyme, because of meter, because of, you know, the meaning that we could glimpse, you know, from a first read. And we would kind of sift through and then keep going deeper and deeper into the poems until we finally thinned them out into one or two choices. By doing that, you know, it not only makes you a closer reader, you know, but it also gives you kind of a greater understanding of poetry in general and how dense a lot of it is, you know. So it's a transformative process, not only in the sense that you're picking new poetry that you've never come to, but in the sense that you also learn by discovering these artists and discovering these words. So.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nina Wagner. I live in DC now. I used to recite poetry in high school, so it makes me really happy that that continues. I have a question for Anita, actually.
Great.
Because I was really impressed with your use of silence and how you, in front of all these people, had the presence to just take your time. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how you picked those silences, how you learned to take those silences and make it such a beautiful reading.
First, thank you. So I'm smiling because I'm looking at my dad. He's here, and this is something we worked on. And his motto is, silence is powerful. And he would tell me all the time, and I'm just looking like, come on, Dad, they're not gonna listen all that time, and I'm not that great, whatever. So that it's really just timing. And when you tell a story, there are certain parts that are important that you want the audience to hang on to. You want them to get this, because hold on, I want you to get this, but I'm about to take it somewhere, or the author is about to take it somewhere. And so you want the audience to take the journey with you, to follow with you. And hearing and seeing, they all connect. So you want to make sure that it's making sense in the head. And so if I'm reading it and there's a comma or a pause there, maybe that's there for a reason. So let's examine what's being said here and try to make sure that I get it. Of course, the audience gets it, but all silences lead to something, and there's silence there for a reason. So really, it's what the author used, and then when you infuse that with the story and trying to make the audience understand it, I think the silences just kind of come natural. But my dad, everything up here, stop there. So that's him. That's really him.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Katie Warner. I'm a student. I'm here for extra credit. But I'm also here because I like books.
Good.
But the extra credit was an incentive. How did you guys go about practicing these and trying to memorize all of this stuff? Because I'm also a theater major at Duke Ellington, so I like figuring out other people's memorization processes.
Strategy, yeah.
So I can get monologues and stuff.
Great. Natasha, do you want to start? Sure.
Okay, so when I chose my poems, first I made sure to pick poems that really spoke to me on a personal level, but also something that I wanted to understand. So I guess you could apply that to monologues as well. When I was reading the poems to memorize them, I rewrote them in a way that looked more like a monologue, because sometimes when you see poetry, the breaks aren't necessarily where you would take them when reciting it. So especially in A Locked House, the stanzas that were written weren't what I necessarily followed when reciting the poem. So by writing it down and finding the meaning of each segment of the poem, that really helped me memorize it because I understood it. I found the story within the poem and tried to feel what that person would feel going through that kind of situation. And the same thing ties into my poem Ecology. That poem is very, very modern, I would say, and I wanted to take it kind of like a rap, just for something different, something new, but that needed to be rewritten in a way that I could find the syncopation within the poem and try to not lose the meaning of the poem. So that really helped me writing it out in a way that I would want to recite it to tell the story.
Lake, do you want to talk a little bit about your practice strategy?
I'm also an actor. I love acting, love being on stage. And there's an activity that I like to do that I learned pretty recently, actually, and it's called The Simple Truth. And it's when you go through a monologue and it's the first thing you're doing, and all you're doing is saying the words so that you believe them in their entirety. So every single word is the truth. When you do that, it helps you to believe what you're saying. When you believe what you're saying, you can really get into character. Then you can add all the other nuances, and you can add all the other character bits that, you know, whatever the Russian nurse is saying, or, you know, whatever the monologue is. You know, and so that not only helps with memorization, but it helps with you right from Jump Street believing everything that you're saying. Because that's what acting is. It's believing what you're saying and making the audience believe that you are that character. So that's my bit.
Thank you. So I'm curious, do you guys also write your own poems? I know that, Natasha, you do, and Anita, I know you've done slam before. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about that process, about reciting a poem for Poetry Out Loud, the work of another person, and then reciting your own work?
So I think Poetry Out Loud, competition-wise, is a little bit more conservative. You know, you're still giving a lot of yourself, but Poetry Out Loud requires this restraint and a diligent need to tell the story of the author. It's not your story, and so you can't embody the poem entirely. It's not yours. You're really just breathing life into the poet's words. And so that requires restraint. It requires, you have to study and understand the author's perspective and, you know, maybe how you relate to that particular story. So conservative in the sense that you can't take over the poem. It's not yours. Not Poetry Out Loud, but a slam, I mean, literally, you're slamming words out onto the stage, onto the floor, into the mic. You're trying to. There's just a heightened intensity in terms of performance. I think writing-wise, it's similar, but slam might be focused more on rhythm and trying to tie in rhythm with the story, because really, I mean, people listen. Music is poetry put to a beat. People listen and they like it and they remember that. So you might write for a rhythm, or you might write for somebody to listen versus wow and you know, looking at the work and really studying it. And slam is more get it now and come with me and let's bob our head too, you know. So I think that's the main difference. They're quite similar. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Anita. That's great. All right, well, I think we maybe have a couple of minutes left. Does anybody else have a question from the audience? No? Steve, yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Steve Young from the Poetry Foundation, and I have the great pleasure of working with Eleanor and everybody at the NEA on this program. And I'm just curious, I'm also a bit of a plant here, about whether your process of assimilating these poems for Poetry Out Loud has transferred into other endeavors of yours.
Ah, okay. So how it's affected other parts of your life. Go ahead, Natasha.
When memorizing the poems for the competition, I really had to put myself into someone else's shoes and look at it not only from how I would read the poem, but from how the author would read the poem and how the person within the poem would read the poem, like what was happening to them, how they felt about it. And I think that this really resulted in a lot of self-introspection. I really had to take a moment and just think and just be alone with my poem. And I think that that really helped with my other classes, all of them, but I would find, I think, especially my English class in general. So when you are working with something so intimately, but it's kind of like what Anita said, it's not your words, it's somebody else's, but you want to make them your own, in a way. So writing essays, analyzing anything, it really opens you up to other people's viewpoints, and it helps you formulate your own and give voice to them. And that's how I did it.
Blake, do you want to talk a little bit?
The process of digesting these poems and, you know, completely embodying them but not embodying them at the same time, that whole entire kind of conflict of interest process, like Natasha said, it's a real introspective thing, and it makes you glance at what you truly do, you know, as an artist, as a performer, as well as who you are. because some of that bleeds into the poem no matter what. Some it's going to bleed into whatever you're performing on stage. But in terms of applying that elsewhere, it just makes me think a lot more. It makes me go a lot slower in most of what I'm doing. Especially in English, you know, and it's going to have more weight, especially when writing things and really trying to discern which word should go where, because every word has meaning and every word is important. And so it's really made me just kind of take things slower, look at things in their entirety, and try to see them from different points of view so that I may digest them fully, and so that, in essence, I become part of that and it becomes part of me. And it's basically a huge, you know, it's a learning process. And this is an example of the learning process that we go through in life, in seeing everything in daily lives and digesting them into our systems.
Thank you, Lake. We are out of time, unfortunately, and so before we give these students who are so brilliant and articulate and lovely another round of applause for being brave and vulnerable and getting up on stage today, I want to remind everyone who is a student, if you're interested in participating in Poetry Out Loud, talk to your teacher. If you're a teacher, come and talk to me at the back of the room. We'll have a table with a bunch of free Poetry Out Loud swag that's back there, as well as teacher toolkits for teachers. So if you're a teacher, you can come sign up and we'll give you a toolkit. Please ask me questions. I'll scoot right back there after we're done. And with that said, please visit poetryoutloud.org and let's thank the students one more time. Oh, awesome. All right. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the festival. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.